Welcome all. Thank you for tuning in to Cedar Radio, your guide to films playing at the Art House for the week of June 14th to June 20th. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Dave Huffman. On this week's episode, we'll be discussing Say My Name, The Dead Don't Die, Echo in the Canyon, and Late Night.
We'll also be discussing Tilda Swinton again, Jim Jarmusch as a genre filmmaker, and Rosalind Russell makes another appearance on our Cedar 3 list. This week, we are counting down great films about show business. Well, we always like to start off the show with the last scene first because we're a little backwards that way. So, Dave, what's the last film you've seen?
The last movie I saw was a 1979, we'll call it a vampire movie. It was called Thirst. It's from Australia, and it's a strange little movie about this, I guess, a society of vampires, but they're not like your normal kind of vampires. It's basically just people that have figured they've discovered the secret of long life is drinking blood, and they run these blood farms where they harvest blood from people. So they're not just running around.
Oh, not just killing people.
They just they just have like these zombified kind of humans that they hook up to a blood milking machine, if you will. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of really nicely shot. It was very interestingly made, and I like a movie that's, you know, a little different on a kind of a classic story that you've seen.
Twist on the genre?
Yes, a little twist on the genre is by a director named Rod Hardy, who hasn't really done like other kind of major significant things, a lot of TV work and stuff like that, but I enjoyed it quite a bit.
I was thinking of two different movies when you were describing it, because I have a first thought of the Korean film Thirst from a couple years ago, the Park Chan-wook movie.
Right.
Because my last scene is actually a Korean movie. And but then when you started the blood farm and then milking the blood, it was my man Ethan Hawke, Daybreakers.
Yeah, Daybreakers.
Which
it had a similar kind of like that. It reminded me of that as well.
Yeah.
So yes.
Although this is before any of those movies, so technically
Right.
Thirst and Daybreakers were stealing from Thirst.
From Thirst.
If you go back far enough, but
and so you said the last thing you saw was Korean. What was it?
Yeah, I went back and we've discussed sort of Korean, I guess, action films. Or genre stuff before, and I grabbed one of those for $1 at the library DVD sales. Choi Dong-hoon is his name, Assassination. He's done The Thieves and a couple other kind of action genre movies. This is the first of his I've seen, but I'm hooked. I'm going in for the rest of his movies.
All right.
It's set in, well, it's a spy action movie, and I was trying to think of like an American action director to kind of compare him to for people unfamiliar with South Korean movies, but it's kind of hard to. He's really kind of a unique director in style, because he's got, it's a spy movie, but it's also a historical epic. It's also an action movie. It's also got kind of elements of westerns, because there's lots of wild shootouts, but right to the edge of kind of almost Wild Bunch style shootouts, but not quite as gory. But it's so well choreographed. You never feel lost in the action. And it's got, it's that the spy genre we just talked about a few weeks ago, where there's double crosses, there's triple crosses. At a certain point, you're just sort of like, you just kind of have to go along for the ride, because it's so quick and in its pacing that you kind of get overwhelmed by all the different spies and what their different resistance plots are going against the. Sorry, I should have started with it's the Japanese occupation of Korea, and it's resistance fighters trying to fight for their freedom. So
it's a period.
It's a period film too, but it has like all the conventions of just like a modern action film. So he did another movie called Thieves that's more of a modern set movie where they're heading to thieves are heading to Hong Kong for a heist. So I'm gonna watch that one next to see how it works in a contemporary setting, but. A lot of really wild set piece scenes, but it's not just set piece for the sake of set piece. It all ties into the plot too, which I think really helps the action kind of pull the narrative forward as well. And it moves so fast, like you just can't be bored with it for a second.
Oh, very cool.
So at the Art House this week, I'll start some buzz first. I caught up with The Souvenir.
Yes.
This weekend, which I know isn't like the most well-attended movie of 2019, but the people that I was talking with that saw it at the screening I was at, it definitely got the conversation going a good 20, 30 minutes in the lobby, kind of talking it through. I can see how some people might not be like really enticed to go see it, but I would really recommend people see it on the big screen because the cinematography in it, while it's one of those very
intimate movies.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a very intimate movie, but like the way she uses space and mirrors is really fascinating.
I love the movie. I saw it as well this last week finally, and it did not disappoint. I thought it was just beautiful, and like I said, I like the trailer because the trailer didn't tell you every little thing about the movie. So when you watch the film, it's just this really interesting character study about a relationship that anybody else looking out at it can be like, what are you doing? You know?
Oh, yeah. I was definitely thinking that at several scenes, but like, you go with it. It's their relationship, not yours, let it unfold.
Yeah. And, but I just thought it was really a beautiful movie. And I thought that, she was very good in the lead, and it's interesting whenever you have her playing against her mom, Tilda Swinton, that, obviously she's got some of her mom's acting talent, but anytime that Tilda Swinton was on screen with her, I was just like, she just doesn't have quite this kind of charisma and like star power that her mom has. Or maybe it's just that Tilda Swinton's like such an enigma and such a talent, like you just can't not look at Tilda Swinton.
But it works for that narrative though, because the mother character is the Tilda Swinton character is so kind of strong and kind of rules the room as soon as she's in it with her daughter. So like the dynamic works for the story.
That's a good point, Aaron.
It's because it's about an artist kind of finding her legs and finding her own voice in the filmmaking film school world of like late 80s. I think it's set England.
Oh no, you know what? It's got to be early 80s because of the music. They played like Small Town Boy by Bronx Ski Beats, and that was like 82, I think, or 83. So yeah. So just dating the music, it's early 80s.
I was going to say, I'm glad I'm on a show with an Anglophile because I was like, I didn't recognize any of the music in it whatsoever. But I was going to say, actually, one of the comments a couple people I was talking to afterwards were saying that one person realized, as did I, that there was not really a score to the movie to tell you emotionally how to feel in each scene, which I love. Like, it just lets you feel it yourself.
Right.
And one of the people we're talking to were like, oh my gosh, yeah, there wasn't any music in the movie. There's music in the movie, but there's no
music,
there's no orchestration to kind of lead you through. You just have to do that on your own. And it's we mentioned on last week's show, but if you stay through all the credits, it does mention The Souvenir Part 2 is coming soon. So like the story is built into the sequel is built into the ending of this one. So checking in with the art house sort of box office and how the movies are kind of, as we've talked before on the show, the platform release where, the coastal cities, the big ones, New York and LA, get the movies before we get those here in Cleveland. The kind of the class of Sundance 2019 is slowly arriving in theaters. We had Booksmart a couple weeks ago, and now coming up, we're going to be having Late Night and The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which both debuted with really strong debuts in the New York and LA markets. We had Late Night originally was like a week or two ago. Was that right?
Well, yeah, the studio changed their plan on that. Like, it was supposed to be a few weeks ago, then it was supposed to open up last Friday, and then they decided at the last minute to do a very quick platform release of only opening at New York and LA last week before expanding it nationally this week. But originally it was supposed to be everywhere last week, but they just felt
that's what it was.
You know what, let's just get 1 week of, kind of people talking like us
about
get the buzz how huge it was in these cities, which is why I guess they still do that. And, so it worked in this case. But
well, because we mentioned, too, when they do this platform release, that gives them time to put the stars or the director or the writer, whoever, in New York or in L.A. to do some Q&As, which obviously boosts the attendance because who wouldn't want to go see, Late Night or Last Black Man in San Francisco if the stars or the director are there to do a Q&A. So it's interesting that it's almost like film releasing, but as part of the marketing.
Yeah, it's all just a marketing strategy. And Last Black Man in San Francisco, which until yesterday we didn't have a firm opening date for it. They were just always being very vague, saying late June.
It's coming
like that. So it is. So now we can say it is officially opening on the 21st. So that'll be here next Friday.
And there was there was another Sundance movie I was going to say, because it's like the Sundance class of 19 is now arriving in the Souvenir was at Sundance as well.
Yeah, Souvenir.
Sorry. So it's if you were reading the news or listening to the podcast, we were doing our distance reporting on the Sundance Film Festival this year. It is arriving over the next over the next couple weeks here at the Art House.
And if people do want to see the Souvenir, it is going to be here at the Cedar Leaf for just one more week, so it'll probably be ending on Thursday the 20th.
Definitely see it. If nothing else, just get ready to get yourself prepared for when the sequel comes out, because I believe some of the interviews I read with Joanna Hogg, I think at Sundance, like she was finishing up the script for it then, so it should be, I would assume this time next year we'll be, talking about the Souvenir Part 2. I always love those, just like the movies that come to the Art House that you're just like, I really want a sequel for that, but there's really no there's no general financial need. Like, it was such a hit, we have to make a sequel. It's like, no, this story just needed it.
And it's not like this film ends with like a cliffhanger that you're not sure like what's going to happen next. It's just going to be the next phase of this person's
Yeah, just
life,
like
I'm
chapter
assuming.
2 or
So,
whatever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll be right back with the new films opening at the theater this week. The first film we have up this weekend is Say My Name from director Jay Stern. This is Mary and Stanton's one-night stand at a hotel gets interrupted by a robbery, and then the complete strangers are forced to help each other navigate the seedy underbelly of a sleepy Welsh island in order to get back their stolen property.
I hate you, you're a curse of a woman. Why are you even here?
I'm getting my necklace back.
Why?
My birth mother left it at the hospital for me, and, well, I've never taken it off since I've had it. What was your worst relationship?
My wife.
And your best?
My wife.
Oh my God! It's Bollocks McGiven!
Bollocks McGiven.
A long story involving a night in Dublin, a poker game, and a frying pan.
So I put in the notes here, Dave, this just, watching the trailer, it just seemed like a Welsh After Hours, the Scorsese film.
Yeah.
It was my
Yeah, I think
immediate
that's it.
recall for that.
I think that's a good comparison. This is, a kind of really funny romantic comedy, if you will, being put up by this new company called Electric Entertainment, I believe it is called. And it's actually the company is owned or run by Dean Devlin, who people might know as, like
Roland Emmerich's partner in crime, right?
Roland Emmerich's partner, who does like major, Independence Day and Geostorm and big kind of Hollywood
Geostorm.
tentpole action movies. And I didn't realize that he was affiliated with the film until I had a note on my desk that said I was supposed to call Dean Devlin back to talk about Say My Name.
Right.
And I didn't look at it right away. And then I'm like, that Dean Devlin? Like, that just seemed very strange.
That can't be
to me.
right,
So,
yeah.
So, yes, I played phone tag with Dean Devlin for a couple of days until we finally connected to talk about the film that they've got that they're putting out. So they're really energetic about trying to put out these new smaller little films.
Sure.
So I appreciate the fact that someone who's like made their fortune from giant Hollywood tentpole movies that they're now, he's now focused on some little indies. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
He seemed like a very nice guy. I joked with him on the phone. I'm like, but when I woke up today, I didn't expect to be talking to Dean Devlin on the phone. So that was kind of funny. And then the next film that we're opening up is The Dead Don't Die, which is the new film from writer-director Jim Jarmusch. It is about a peaceful town and that is suddenly finds itself under attack by a zombie horde, and the local police, played by Bill Murray and Adam Driver, who are trying to keep things under control.
In this peaceful town, on these quiet streets, something terrifying, something horrifying is coming.
Excuse me, we're closed. Get away from me!
What the hell was it? A wild animal?
This is really awful. Maybe the worst thing I've ever seen.
What was it, wild animals?
So what are you thinking?
I'm thinking zombies.
What?
You know, the undead. Ghouls.
So this one you have seen, Dave?
I have seen The Dead Don't Die, and Jim Jarmusch, for me, I generally, he's a filmmaker that I always want to see his movies. I think that I appreciate what he does, his unique kind of voice and perspective. I loved The Only Lovers Left Alive with Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston. I thought that was great from a couple years ago, his vampire movie. So I think it's interesting that now he's doing sort of like another genre movie, which, now he's taking on zombies. And
Right.
his typical, very, very dry kind of sense of humor. If you watch the trailer perfectly conveys the tone of the film. So Bill Murray and Adam Driver and Chloe Sevigny and Tilda Swinton again back for this. And apparently all I do is talk about Tilda Swinton.
I was just going to say.
She's amazing.
Theme.
Yeah, she is. She's great. So she's actually, in my opinion, the best part of the movie. I thought she kind of stole the show.
I was thinking when, because like Jim Jarmusch, like you said, is a director who I just keep up with him no matter what he does. I don't love every single one of his movies, but I love that he's out there doing exactly what he wants to do with film. So then when this movie popped up as like the opening night movie at the Cannes Film Festival a month or so ago, we're like, all right, Jim Jarmusch, Cannes Film Festival, that makes sense. But the fact that it was like a zombie buddy comedy, I was like, wait, that seems out of left field for Jim Jarmusch. But then looking at his career, I really hadn't realized the genre work he's done. You've got Dead Man, which is his take on a Western, Ghost Dog, his take on like
His
a samurai film, and Only Lovers Left Alive, his take on vampires. Like, oh, this is actually perfectly in line with what he's been doing. And it was just giddy that we're going to get Venkman and Kylo Ren fighting zombies together in a Jim Jarmusch movie. Like, it just sounds like we keep mentioning how heavy a lot of stuff is at the art house. Like, this just seems like, I can't wait to go because it seems like a fun trip to the art house.
Yeah, it's not a zombie movie, and it's certainly not scary. It does have some comedic gore in it, but it is not a scary movie. It is definitely a comedy.
Okay. The next film we are opening is the continuing run of Cleveland International Film Festival 43 alumni films coming to the theater. So if you didn't see Echo in the Canyon, Andrew Slater's documentary, this takes a look at the roots of the historic music scene in LA's Laurel Canyon area.
There is a season turn.
Laurel Canyon. It's like an open ticket to a studio, to a record, to everything.
That's an incredible environment for a musician to be in.
I fell in love with it.
All the bands you think of as that California sound.
Buffalo Springfield.
My name is Neil Young.
The Beach Boys.
Hi, Brian Wilson.
The Mamas and Papas.
The Birds.
They were all there.
This kind of thing could only happen in Laurel Canyon.
So some of the iconic, when I heard Laurel Canyon, I know that as like a touchstone for music history, but I couldn't have rattled off like, oh, it's the Byrds, the Beach Boys, Buffalo Springfield, Mamas and the Papas. Yeah. Like it's, the iconic, music of the area, or some of the iconic music of the era is just right there in one area. And all these musicians were just hanging out, kind of trying to seems like friendly competition to kind of who can make the next, breakthrough culturally defining album, and they just kept doing it.
That's exactly what it is. And even in the film, Michelle Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas basically says that when they were like, I think it was the Byrds, and she said like they're driving around and they hear the Byrds on the radio and they're like, well, if the Byrds can have a hit, so can we,
right?
So like it's totally like just kind of these are our friends, and if they're doing it, we can do it. And yeah, it's really, the music in this film is fantastic. Obviously, it's some of the greatest songs ever written in American pop music, with and it's got a lot of living legends still in it. It's got Brian Wilson in it. It's got Michelle Phillips that I talked about. It's got Stephen Stills and David Crosby, and the whole thing is kind of centered around Jacob Dylan, who of course his father is Bob Dylan.
Right.
He had decided they were going to help coordinate this concert, kind of highlighting all this music. So they've got Jacob Dylan, Fiona Apple, Cat Power, just all these kind of more contemporary artists,
right,
covering all of these songs and doing their own kind of take on them. And it's just it's a very good film filled with some of the best music you're ever going to hear. So it's really worth checking out. It's
one of those, like the buzz downtown at the festival a couple months ago when the first few screenings in Cleveland happened for the movie. Granted, this could be that festival bubble kind of mentality, but people walking out like, that is just one of the best music documentaries I've ever seen. Good, because I think it's one of those, maybe if you were alive during the era, it's going to hit some nostalgic buttons, but also you maybe weren't aware that like so many of these bands were all from like the same area and friends together, because it was a different media environment where you weren't following these bands on social media back in the day to know like, oh yeah, these guys and gals all worked together, overlap, or did a studio session with this other band, or how any of that worked. So it just kind of connects a lot of like that cultural tissue that's been around for a while that people may not be aware of.
Absolutely. The final film we're opening up this week is the new comedy Late Night, directed by Nisha Ganatra, and of course written and starring Mindy Kaling. It's about a talk show host who is losing kind of her footing in the industry and hires a new young female writer to add a new perspective.
I'll tell you what doesn't work. A newcomer coming in and giving me her assessment of my comic persona.
I will not be marginalized because no one here looks like me.
She's not trying to silence your strong female woman of color spirit. #MeToo, blah, blah, blah. You're a new writer with no experience. Write something.
Okay.
So this one came out of Sundance, as we mentioned a little bit ago, with a very, very strong buzz. And as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, how Booksmart, as sort of unjustly was getting the, it's female super bad. Movies always have to have like that comparative analysis for what people think it's going to do at the box office or how it's going to connect with audiences. Coming out of the Sundance comedy, being released in the summer, it seemed like it was in that slot that like The Big Sick occupied years ago. I think it's because someone known as a comedian, wrote a screenplay and then is starring in it, and then coming out through the festival circuit and platform releasing and whatnot. So for some reason, I don't know if I did that unjustly or not, but Late Night has like the big sick quality for the summer at the art house to me.
They've also, they're making people draw those comparisons too, because Amazon put out Big Sick and Amazon is putting out Late Night, and in the trailer they have one of my favorite things where they go, "From the studio that brought you Big Sick."
Oh, that's maybe what. Okay, yeah, that's why it's in my head then.
As if people have any that I think that's hilarious. I'm like, well, they could also put up there like, "From the studio that brought you Suspiria."
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they're not related.
From the studio that brought you Life itself.
It's not like they're a studio that only puts out one type of movie that you can identify like specifically.
That's true, but at the same time, people like last night or the other day when I saw The Souvenir, a couple of people had mentioned it was like, another A24 film. Like they're recognizing the studio, but like you said, not because of it's a genre, just like they're recognizing the logo at the art house because these are sort of like the major art house players these days. But
but there are some studios like A24 and Neon that I think are kind of developing a certain kind of
aesthetic,
like these are the types of movies that we put out.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think that Amazon has that.
No, not yet.
Although, Amazon, the types of films that they are acquiring, like Amazon's this huge company, but they are really committed to, and I appreciate they're committed to showing their films in the theater.
Oh,
they're committed to some really interesting small little films.
Absolutely.
They're not just like making giant blockbusters.
Right.
They did Manchester by the Sea and, like you said, Big Sick and Late Night. So they're committed to cool art house films. So I admire them for that.
But as you said, on the public's end, I don't think the public is necessarily aware of that just yet. Maybe a year or two from now, we'll be talking a different story. But at the art house, though, I'm very much excited to see Emma Thompson doing an out-and-out comedy.
Yeah.
And we mentioned, I don't remember if that was off mic or if it was on mic now, the idea with like Booksmart being like a really smart, witty, quick-paced comedy, but has a lot of like interesting social issues that it's tackling and addressing in a very fun comedic way where it doesn't feel as heavy as the issues are. Where this Late Night seems to be kind of going in the same direction with ideas of like representation and diversity in the workplace, but it's not a heavy-handed drama about it. It has probably some dramatic elements to it, but mostly it's done in a very comedic way.
Even in the trailer, like whenever Mindy Kaling comes into the writer's room for the first time and they won't let her sit in a chair, and she's like, "Oh, I'll just sit on this trash can." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's such a great subtle way of saying like, where she is in the pecking order there and how women in the workplace are being treated.
But in a comedic way.
In a hilarious way.
Yeah. So I also want to mention, too, it didn't occur to me until I was just looking at our notes here, John Lithgow, as you mentioned, is like in everything.
He's in everything.
Just did The Tomorrow Man. He's also now in Late Night coming this weekend. So we'll be right back with our Seedly 3 picks for this week. All right, well, each week we like to take inspiration from one of the new films opening and suggest 3 films to broaden your cinematic world. This week we took inspiration from Late Night and went with the topic show business films. So, Dave, what aspect of show business were you kind of looking at with your films? The seedy underbelly, the glitz and glamour that seduce people to like follow this as their career path, as what seems like it happens in Late Night, or a mix of everything, or...
I wanted to kind of highlight different things. At first I thought, I'm like, I'll just do all TV stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do like one from every sort of aspect of, main kind of areas of show business.
Okay.
And since I always try to figure out a way to talk about Rosalind Russell, the first one I'm going to talk about is Gypsy from 1962, Murphy Leroy's adaptation of the classic stage musical, which is, of course, a very loose kind of biography about Gypsy Rose Lee and her pushy stage mother, played in the film by Rosalind Russell and famously brought to the stage by Ethel Merman. It is, it just focuses on show business from the days of vaudeville,
right,
and the death of vaudeville. So and it kind of just has that kind of behind the scenes thing, especially where the whole legend of the stage mother is personified by the character.
Oh, for sure.
Mama Rose. It's just an amazing character that everyone from Ethel Merman and Rosalind Russell and Bette Midler and all these people that have played why am I blanking on her name? Imelda Staunton was just playing her on stage as well. I saw her in the production to that in London a few years back. So I mean, it's a great role that actresses love to play, and there's a reason for it, and it really shows just this aspect of show business that we don't have around anymore. So I appreciate that. Plus, it's got amazing songs.
Right. Okay, that's actually a pretty good transition. I picked one classic one because I was like, there's so many, Gypsy, that's, you said that film version was 60?
Mm-hmm. 1962.
62.
Yeah.
Okay. So I chose Bad and the Beautiful from 1952, just to kind of look at that classic kind of Hollywood studio system sort of way that movies were made back then. So this is the Vincent Minnelli film. What is it? Lana Turner, Kirk Douglas. Oh, come on, brain. Dick Powell, I think, right? Yeah.
Walter Pidgeon.
Walter Pidgeon, yeah, is in there too.
Yeah.
And that kind of the I think the description on IMDb that I jotted down was like an unscrupulous movie producer, which is like the nicest way to describe Kirk Douglas in that kind of role, which, you know, it's the era when you contract players and, you know, actors and directors, writers were all just like working at a studio, and the producer was sort of like the master manipulator. As soon as I thought of this movie, I really wanted to go back and rewatch it, which I didn't have time to before we hit record, just to see how well it's aged, but also in the post, you know, he should not be named on the show kind of era of evil movie producer. Like, if this movie kind of really does capture like what that kind of toxic vibe that can happen in the movie business, even back in the 1950s.
Well, I've seen it in the not too distant past, and it's aged extremely well. It's
okay,
just
excellent.
A fantastic movie. So yeah, it's you know.
So that kind of mentality is just an abuse of power has just always been there when you get around this sort of thing. So
you know, there's certain things that are very dated about it, obviously,
right?
But it's still very relevant as far as, you know, character motivations in show business and the dirtbaggery of it all.
Yeah.
Well, the next film I'm going to talk about is also kind of seedy underbelly and disturbing nature of Hollywood, and that is The Day of the Locust from 1975.
Oh, I almost went with that
Schlesinger.
one. Yeah.
It is truly one of my favorite films of the 70s, and talk about a movie that would never in a cajillion years ever get made anymore.
Oh, no.
Because the final act of that film, I won't give it away, is just really unsettling, and it's just a great, powerful movie. And it's interesting because, you know, it's got Donald Sutherland and Karen Black, and William Atherton is the lead. And I was telling someone, because I think we were watching Ghostbusters, and of course William Atherton's later career was all just playing, you know, greaseball-y kind of weaselly characters from like Die Hard and
you could almost say a lot of dirtbaggery in his later career.
Exactly. There you go. But, you know, there was a time when William Atherton just got cast as the sort of like nice guy lead in the movies, you know. So
yeah, that's really hard to picture these days.
Yeah. So just check it out just for that, to see if you can kind of put aside your perception of William Atherton. But it's a great film. I don't want to talk too much about it because it's just sort of one of those movies, the less you know, the better. But it is 1930s Hollywood with a lot of great behind-the-scenes things about movie making. And I think it's an art director who's the kind of what he does in the film. So it's a different kind of thing. Usually you only see people that are, you know, actors or
That's
the director
true. Yeah.
The
The main
this is kind of a different
heads of
person.
production, right?
Yeah, it's a really great movie that I think a lot of people don't talk about anymore. But it's
no, for sure. Yeah, it's like you said, you don't want to talk too much about it or do too many plot spoilers, because it is sort of not necessarily forgotten, but it's like a deeper cut of the 70s that is definitely worth checking out. And if you know anything about it, there's so many great like little surprises to go along the way as you watch that film. The next one I picked was I mentioned on a previous Cedar 3 the Noah Baumbach film Kicking and Screaming as a movie that for some reason me and my roommates in college watched over and over and over again. I'm not sure why that one hit us, but so did this one, State in Maine, when that came out, like my last couple years of college, the David Mamet film from 2000. We just watched this one over and over again. It's hilarious, and it's you know, that kind of David Mamet when he's not in you know, Glengarry Glen Ross, House of Cards kind of intense drama. Like his wit is like, to me, like that old school like Hollywood kind of It Happened One Night kind of witty like banter where like it's so everybody's just so rapid fire smart and witty that it's just fun to listen to. And that's what State in Maine is. It's you know, movie crew invades a small town. And then this one I picked also because it has that aspect of the effect that, you know, the glamorous world of show business has on everyday folks like, you know, you, me, the small town where this movie takes place, where it comes in, you're like, oh, wow, you know, this big production's coming into town, and everyone's just enamored by it, even though it's full of just like, you know, I don't know, dirtbaggery and shenanigans and horrible people and people that just want to use people up for their resources and then just like move on to, you know, the next town where they're going to shoot their next project in. But it's also now it's nostalgic because Philip Seymour Hoffman's there. Of course, William H. Macy, Rebecca Pidgeon, the usual Mamet, stalwart actors that he always works with. But it's a Mamet comedy that I think also because it moves at such a clip. Every time we'd watch it again and again, you'd be like, "Oh, I missed that line before," because you were laughing at the previous line, and the movie doesn't slow down for a second.
No, I love that movie, and I'd actually kind of forgotten all about it, so thank you for reminding me.
Oh, no problem. It is not streaming when I was doing a quick look. You actually have to go to your library or buy it. As we always say, physical media is the best way to watch it anyway.
And, well, the final film that I want to talk about is, again, in my opinion, one of the best movies ever made, certainly one of the best films of the 70s, and that is Sidney Lumet's Network from 1976.
Oh, yes.
I wanted to talk about one film that's about television, since late night is about set
television.
In the TV world.
Yeah.
And Network, if you've never seen it, of course, I think it was just adapted on Broadway as well. It is.
Wait, it was? Or it is?
You didn't know?
No.
Yeah. I think it's done its run, but yeah, they just had. Trying to remember who was in it. It was real big names. I know.
Well, anyway, yeah.
I
know I missed that
off
one.
Topic. But Network is, kind of weirdly still relevant because it kind of is this transitional period of when news stopped being news and became entertainment.
Yes.
And it is, you just see all the roots of where we are right now in the world of quote unquote news coverage on cable TV as, as they started looking to make the news wing of the TV networks
profitable
kind of thing, as opposed to a public service sort of thing. So it is a great film with William Holden and Faye Dunaway and Oscar winners, Peter Finch, and I'm blanking on the woman who played his wife in the movie.
You're really testing my memory here.
Yeah, but she won, and I think she might still hold the record as one of the Oscar winners,
shortest screen
the least
time
amount of short screen time.
Yeah.
So, man, that's going to drive me crazy. So,
it's either like her or Judi Dench in Shakespeare in Love, or one of the. Wait, was it Shakespeare in Love? Where she pops in for one scene and
Yep.
I mean, they're both pivotal scenes. I would say Network's a lot better because I like Network more than I like Shakespeare in Love, but. I always think of, and anytime I think of Faye Dunaway in Network, the first one that comes to mind is always just ferocious.
Yeah. No wonder I couldn't remember her name, because this isn't in my brain at all. Beatrice Straight. That is the actress that won.
Yeah, my brain was never going to just dig that one up.
Yeah.
My last one is, this actually, it ties in a weird way, because it's a documentary about the 70s and making movies, but it didn't come out until 1991, and that is Hearts of Darkness, a filmmaker's apocalypse. I always want to try to get, one documentary on the list. So this chronicles how somehow Francis Ford Coppola got Apocalypse Now made back in the 70s, and it just it charts the whole thing, and it's one of those you get kind of the megalomaniacal height of Coppola at his filmmaking powers in the 70s when everything was kind of just going right to his head. I mean, I'm not saying he's unjustly. I love the guy as a director. His movies of the 70s are some of the best American films that were made in that era. But you could just see sort of the grandiose nature of this is what I'm going to do next, and this he was really feeling the powers of coming off of 2 Godfather movies,
right, and
going into adapting Joseph Conrad
book.
Don't remember. Anyway. Doing an adaptation, but setting it in Vietnam, and then just the troubled production of trying to film the movie the way that they did. Anyway, I just watch the movie. It's one of those it's a great time capsule, making of documentaries where you just get to see what can all go wrong when you're doing just this giant production in the middle of the jungle. You've got the elements themselves, plus you've got Marlon Brando and his ego. That's a documentary in and of itself on that movie. So then you also have an out of control Dennis Hopper in the 1970s Dennis Hopper too. So all of that just sort of coming together it really makes you appreciate. How many versions of Apocalypse Now are there now? Is it the third one now that's coming out?
I think the third one is coming out now, yeah.
So I'm fine. I'll revisit it anytime in any form, but the fact that anything coherent came out of that experience when you watch the documentary is just amazing. So next week's episode, we'll be discussing 3 new movies as of right now. Pavarotti, Ron Howard's new documentary about Pavarotti. Heading Home, The Tale of Team Israel. And Last Black Man in San Francisco, speaking of Sundance alumni films coming to the theater. So next week's Cedarly 3 is inspired by The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Our topic is going to be cities as a character in movies. Submit your picks at Cedarly Theater using the hashtag Cedarly3, the number 3. Well, before we sign off for this week, we do want to let you know about a few of the special events we have coming up. The first of those is Turner Classic Movies is continuing their anniversary screenings of classic films. Coming up on June 16th and June 18th, we've got Field of Dreams, the classic Kevin Costner baseball film, right in the middle of baseball season. Perfect time to revisit that film. On June 16th, Sunday, it'll be playing at 1 p.m., and June 18th, the Tuesday, it'll be playing at 7 p.m.
And, of course, June 16th is Father's Day, so it's a perfect film for Father's Day.
Wow, I totally spaced on that day when I was reading that there.
And then starting on June 19th, we're going to be having our summer annual $1 family film series. The first film in the series is Trolls, the animated film Trolls, and that's going to be at 10 o'clock. And if you've never seen Trolls, it's actually a film that I love. It's one of my little guilty pleasures. That movie just makes me smile every time I watch it.
You know, I missed it in the theater when my kids saw it, and they're like, my daughter was like, you got to watch it. And I was like, oh, really? And then I watched it. I was like, wow, I'm really glad you made me watch that. Because there's no reason why that movie should be as good as it is.
It's one of those weird things that so I always joke when I see some garbage kind of looks like garbage kids movie trailer.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to open. I'm like, I'm not going to dismiss it because I never would have thought that I loved Trolls either.
Right. Yeah, that animated kids movie based on the dolls with weird hair. Why would that movie not be great? And then the Met, again, is doing its summer encore series, some of the classic and very popular current titles that the Met has recently done. This is on June 19th, Wednesday at 7 p.m. We'll be re-showing Romeo and Juliet at 7 p.m. As always, thank you for tuning in to Cedarly Radio and lending us your ears this week. All the music heard on the show is original music written by Grant Heineman and performed by the New Heights Jazz Ensemble, used with their permission, of course. Visit clevelandcinemas.com for correct showtimes and to purchase advance tickets. Also, there are links in the show notes. You can use those if you'd like as well. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Cedarly Theater, spelled with an R-E at the end because we're fancy like that. Don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcast, and while you're subscribing, leave us a rating and review, or better yet, tell a fellow film geek about the show. We'll see you at the movies.